Good horror movies are such a rarity these days, they're almost like a mythical creature. Like a big, hulking, blood-soaked unicorn. Or at least, that's what the old-timers will tell you. Fans of OG horror speak as if through a great and terrible fog. Remember long ago when horror movies used to be awesome? Yeah, those were the days. Most of you have, of course, sampled all of the big boy horror movies, like Halloween, The Shining, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Exorcist, as your spooky rites of passage. And Lord knows you've heard me bashing on about them all long enough too. Whilst it is important to appreciate these films as masterpieces, scratching under the surface can be just as satisfying if you know where to go poking around. And that's where we get to the good old cult film. These are known for their dedicated fan bases, elaborate subcultures with repeated viewings, endless quotes, and of course, sometimes a spot of audience participation. They're usually profit failures that recoup over time. And oh boy, there are definitely plenty to choose from. So let's get to it then, eh? I am the box office bomb that is Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 cult horror movies you must see before you die. 10. Happy Birthday to Me, 1981. Part of the holiday-themed cycle of slasher films inspired by Halloween, Happy Birthday to Me is a classic whodunit injected with a lovely helping of gore, and an unusual, mostly male streak of victims. At the snobby Crawford Academy, Virginia's group of friends start to go missing years after horrible events that happened to her as a child around her birthday. At face value, you would be forgiven for expecting the obvious. By the time this film was released, we'd already had Friday the 13th, Graduation Day, My Bloody Valentine, and plenty more. So what was left to terrorise in terms of notable calendar dates? Well, everyone has a birthday, right? Happy Birthday to Me is now considered a verifiable classic to gore lovers everywhere. Many of the genre's cliches that we now take for granted were forged by this opus, and no real slasher fan should exclude this well-wrapped gift from their collection. Whether you buy the outlandishness of the final reveal or not, the atmospheric and delightfully grotesque party scene is one for the ages. 9. Tokyo Gore Police, 2008. In the near future, self-mutilation and cutting have not only become acceptable, but trendy, to the point where products are marketed to the cutting consumer and secret fetish bars exist showcasing the latest modifications. In this brave new world, the Japanese police force has been privatized into the Tokyo Police Corporation. Their primary goal is to exterminate engineers, people who, via genetic enhancements, are able to turn any injury into a weapon that they can then use to their advantage. Tokyo Gore Police is quite simply a parade of bloodshed, samurai action, and modern sci-fi horror mixed with campy over-the-top heroics and creepy characters popping in left and right. It is pretty much a gory circus of eye candy. There are so many surprises along the way that the imaginative basis is mind-boggling. To name a few, there's a girl who becomes an alligator from the waist down, another who sprays acid from her titties, another who has attached swords to her severed limbs, and even a villain who can shoot claws from guns mounted into his eye sockets. Good. It's just good. Enjoy. 8. Society, 1989. Bill is worried that he is different to his sister and parents. They mix with other upper-class people, while Bill is more down to earth. Even his girlfriend seems a bit odd. But then, naturally, all is revealed when Bill returns home to find a party in full swing. Some films are immediately resonant and manage to be even more so as time goes by and people continue to properly contextualize them. Brian Yuzna's directorial debut, Society, is one such film. When it was initially released, it was a clear reaction against 80s excess and yuppie culture. However, in the wake of 20+ years worth of unrest over wealth inequality and the Occupy movement, it is tough to hear a film insist that the rich have always fed on the poor and not consider it not only eerie prescient, but also delightful since it literalizes that instance in an outrageously bizarre manner. If you have a strong stomach and can tolerate a film where a bunch of rich Beverly Hills aristocrats mesh and bind into a pile of wet, pulsating flesh during a vile and repulsive yet ultimately funny orgy, then give Society a spin. You won't be disappointed. And yes, that is a man's face coming out of his ass. 7. The Burning, 1981. Made at the height of the low-budget slasher film craze, The Burning tells the story of an alcoholic caretaker named Cropsy at a camp who falls victim to a prank carried out by a bunch of no-good campers who accidentally burn the poor guy alive. After recovering, Cropsey leaves the hospital and heads back to the camp to execute his revenge. If there is one thing that sets this film apart from the pack, it is the death scenes. The great Tom Savini actually passed up working on Friday the 13th Part 2 to head up the special effects of this film, which ultimately became banned in the UK for a particularly gruesome and bloody scene in which Cropsey hurtles out of an abandoned canoe and dismembers 5 campers in hasty succession. As you could probably imagine, the burning was severely cut by the MPAA and international censors upon its release. With that being said, be sure to find an uncut version of the film if you can. Don't say I don't give you the good stuff, my guys. 6. The Beyond, 1981. In 1927 Louisiana, a group of angry villagers brutally assault and crucify a man who is a painter and alleged warlock living in the Seven Doors Hotel, the apparent guardian of a door to hell situated in the hotel's basement. 54 years later, Liza Merrill purchases the old hotel and notices bizarre occurrences that are intensified after she meets a peculiar blind girl named Emily. Detailing that she must leave the establishment before the gate is opened, a plumber inadvertently locates a hidden room in the bowels of the hotel, thereby allowing Hell's minions to walk the earth. From Beyond is a mixture of surrealism and straightforward horror, and this mixture naturally makes for a lot of happenings that don't make much sense. For this reason, From Beyond can be difficult for people to really get, often feeling like a linear narrative that is thrown together without any sense of how or why. But in reality, the event's lack of logic is exactly what makes them horrifying. Combine this purposeful lack of logic with deceptively adept pacing, and you have a true horror masterpiece. 5. Prince of Darkness, 1987. Prince of Darkness is the second part of what director John Carpenter has dubbed his Apocalypse trilogy, which began with 1982's The Thing and ended with 1995's In the Mouth of Madness. Though the 3 films are different stories and not directly connected, they all deal with a threat that could destroy humanity if allowed to go unchecked. Poking around in a church cellar, a priest finds an otherworldly vial filled with slime. Frightened, he brings his discovery to a circle of top scholars and scientists, who eventually learn that the strange liquid is the essence of Satan. The slime then begins to seep out, turning some of the academics into zombified killers. As the possessed battle the survivors, Student Kelly is infected by a large quantity of the liquid and becomes Satan personified. Prince of Darkness is an elegantly photographed, legitimately frightening tale that does not shirk away from its controversial concepts. The first half of this movie is pure horror gold. Ambient lighting, a tremendously creepy score, and a real sense of gloom and dread paint the backdrop for this deliberately paced second act and the ultimate climax. It's without question one of Carpenter's most underrated films, and one that doesn't deserve to be forgotten. 4. TETSUO, the Iron Man, 1989. A man who collects scrap metal, identified as the fetishist, slices his leg open with a knife and inserts a metal pipe beside his thigh bone. Then runs into the street when he notices maggots in the wound, where he is struck by a car driven by a salaryman and his girlfriend. The salaryman leaves the scene of the accident and later finds a piece of sharp metal growing out of his cheek. As the days go by, his entire body begins to transform into a machine. Many hallucinations later, the fetishist, still alive and also half made of metal, returns to do battle with the now almost completely mechanized salaryman. Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo, the Iron Man, is a relentlessly energetic film made at a time when the energy had all but disappeared from Japanese film. The culmination of a decade's worth of amateur short filmmaking and the crowning achievement on the activities of a private, experimental theatre group, Tetsuo has all of the characteristics of unbridled zeal and amateur enthusiasm, and all the signs of true filmmaking talent. It's a film that combines nightmarish imagery with modern industrial sensibilities, and in short, this is extreme Asian cinema at its finest. 3. Maniac, 1980. The best exploitation films make you feel like a dirtbag simply by association. Watching them, whether you're in a movie theatre full of like-minded fans or alone on your comfiest couch, you're repulsed but also weirdly fascinated. How could someone make something so depraved? Why am I voluntarily watching this? Like the best exploitation films, Maniac leaves you itching for a long, hot shower to wash away any secondhand sweat and grime. The film begins with a particularly nasty beachside murder where the viewer is looking through the eyes of Frank Zito, a psychotic killer and the main character. As the film progresses, we follow Frank and get a first-hand look at what life is like for the serial killer. Here is a hint. It is creepy and it is gross. Maniac has been hailed as one of the most troubling pictures ever made. Gruesome effects by Tom Savini highlight the feature and add even more depth to an already severely grim atmosphere. People have called the film an abomination, filthy trash, and even the worst of the worst. In other words, it's a must-see. 2. Black Christmas, 1974. Although Halloween is credited as a film that kicked off the slasher genre, and Friday the 13th is considered the film that inspired a slew of imitations, Black Christmas predates them both by nearly half a decade. This makes it all the more impressive then that despite being one of the earliest proper examples of the genre, it remains one of the better slasher movies 40 plus years after its original release. Black Christmas is a Yuletide take on The Babysitter and the Mad Upstairs urban legend. Exploitative in the way that only a 70s movie can be, the tension begins with a series of threatening phone calls being placed from a deranged man who is hiding out in the attic that quickly escalate to cold-blooded murder, with sorority sisters being knocked off left, right, and centre. From the first eerie strains of benevolent holiday carols to its chilling conclusion, you will be glued to the screen. 1. Torso, 1973. Someone is strangling co-eds. The only clue is that the killer owns a red and black scarf, and police are stumped. American exchange student Jane and her friends decide to take a break from classes by going up to Danielle's uncle's villa in the country. Unfortunately, a killer decides to follow, and the women begin suffering a rapid attrition problem. One of Italy's best scare flicks that has always been overlooked and underappreciated, despite the fact it is just as good as many of the more well-known giallo filmmakers' most celebrated movies, is Torso, directed by Sergio Martino. Martino delivered all of the goods here. Nudity, violence, and some really solid scares too. The stylized depiction and cinematography really amps up the tension using tried and true gimmicks like point-of-view action and odd-angled camera shots. What the film lacks in explicit gore, it more than makes up for in its off-screen carnage and uncontaminated suspense. As the tagline says, enter if you dare the bizarre world of the psychosexual mind. Ooh, don't mind if I do. And that's our list. What other cult horror movies would you add to this list? There are so many, and this one has heavily focused on some 80s classics, so please share me your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash, and this has been What Culture. Make sure to subscribe to the What Culture YouTube channel for more lists like this, and don't forget to visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. Thanks for watching.